Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Malcolm Rowe closed his laptop and leaned back in his leather chair, watching the Seattle skyline darken through his corner office window. At 36, he'd built Vortex Solutions from a garage startup into a $15 million enterprise specializing in renewable energy consulting. His phone buzzed, a text from his wife, Carolina. "Your mom called again. Christmas dinner. She asked 3 times if we're coming." Malcolm smiled grimly. His mother never called him directly. She always went through Carolina, as if speaking to her own son was beneath her. "Heading home," he texted back. The drive to his Bellevue home took 40 minutes through evening traffic. Carolina met him at the door, her dark eyes filled with concern. They'd been married for 8 years, and she'd witnessed every slight, every dismissal from his family. "We don't have to go," she said, handing him a glass of bourbon. "We can spend Christmas in Cabo like we planned." Malcolm kissed her forehead. "I need to go. One last time." "Malcolm, she's never going to change. Neither will Brett or Crystal." He'd known that for years. His older brother Brett, 41, worked at their mother's real estate firm, or rather, showed up occasionally between golf games and expensive lunches. Crystal, 34, had married Jerry Cherry, a mid-level manager who spent more time networking at country clubs than working. Both lived in houses their mother helped buy, drove cars she co-signed for, and acted like Malcolm didn't exist unless they needed something. "Tell me about your day," Malcolm said, changing the subject. Carolina ran a nonprofit for foster youth, work that actually mattered. They talked for an hour before he retreated to his home office. Inside a locked drawer was a folder. Malcolm had been compiling it for 3 years, ever since his mother's 75th birthday party, when she'd introduced him to her bridge club as "my other son," while Brett received a toast as "my pride and joy." The folder contained bank statements, contracts, emails, and photographs. Evidence. Truth. Ammunition. Henry Guerrero, his business partner and former college roommate, had helped gather some of it. Henry was a forensic accountant by training before they'd started Vortex together, and his skills had proved invaluable. "You sure about this?" Henry had asked last week. "Once you light this match, there's no putting it out. I've been their invisible son for 36 years, Malcolm had replied. "Time they actually see me." Malcolm's childhood was a masterclass in favoritism. While Brett got a new car for his 16th birthday, Malcolm received a bus pass. When Crystal wanted to attend art school, their mother liquidated a CD to pay tuition. When Malcolm earned a full scholarship to MIT, Lorraine Rowe told him, "At least you're finally useful for something, not costing us money." He'd gone anyway, graduated with honors, and built his life with zero help from home. He'd paid his own way through graduate school, working 3 jobs. When he'd started Vortex, he'd maxed out credit cards and slept in his car for 2 months. His mother never asked about his business, never visited his office, never acknowledged his success. But she called when she needed money. The first time was 6 years ago. Crystal's husband Jerry had lost his job, and they were facing foreclosure. Malcolm had quietly wired $50,000. No thank you. No acknowledgement. At Thanksgiving that year, Lorraine had praised Brett for keeping the family together financially. The calls became regular. Property tax shortfalls. Brett's gambling debts disguised as business investments. Crystal's maxed out credit cards. Malcolm paid it all, keeping meticulous records. Now, as he sat in his home office the week before Christmas, he reviewed the timeline. His mother's real estate company, Rowe Properties, showed healthy profits on paper. In reality, Brett had been systematically draining accounts for 5 years. Malcolm had discovered this 18 months ago when Lorraine had asked for a $100,000 bridge loan. Instead of refusing, Malcolm had hired Henry to dig deeper. What they found was staggering. Brett had embezzled over $600,000 through false vendor payments, inflated expense reports, and outright theft. He'd been covering it by manipulating their mother's personal accounts, slowly bleeding her dry while maintaining the illusion of success. Crystal wasn't innocent either. She'd convinced their mother to co-sign business loans for Jerry's consulting firm, a company that existed only on paper. Those loans, totaling $200,000, were in default. Jerry had spent the money on a boat and a timeshare in Maui. But here was the twist. Malcolm had been keeping Lorraine Rowe financially solvent for 6 years without her knowledge. Every time the company account dipped into the red, he'd made anonymous transfers to cover it. Every time her personal account approached zero, he'd found ways to funnel money back. He'd paid Crystal's mortgage for 18 months. He'd covered Brett's gambling debts to keep collectors from their mother's door. The family had no idea their white sheep was actually their savior. They'd built their lives on his invisible generosity while treating him like garbage. "Carolina," he called. His wife appeared in the doorway. "I need you to make a call to Aunt Vivian." Lorraine's sister Vivian Andrews had been the only family member who'd ever been kind to Malcolm. She'd lent him $2,000 for his first semester textbooks, money he'd paid back with interest. She was also the family gossip, which made her perfect for what came next. "What should I tell her?" Carolina asked. "Tell her we're coming to Christmas dinner. Tell her I'm finally ready to be part of the family." Malcolm smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "Tell her I'm bringing a surprise." Christmas Eve arrived with snow, rare for Seattle, but fitting. Malcolm spent the day making final preparations. He'd had documents professionally printed and bound. He prepared multiple copies. The envelope itself was expensive vellum, sealed with red wax. "You look calm," Carolina observed as they dressed for dinner. She wore an elegant black dress. He wore a tailored charcoal suit. They looked like they were attending a funeral, not a family celebration. "I am calm," Malcolm said. "I've been planning this for 3 years. Every contingency is covered." They drove to his mother's estate in Medina, a house Malcolm's money had helped save from foreclosure twice, though Lorraine didn't know it. The circular driveway was packed with cars: Brett's Tesla, Crystal's Range Rover, Aunt Vivian's Mercedes, and several others. Inside, the house sparkled with decorations. Lorraine Rowe, 78 but still formidable in a crimson dress, held court in the living room. Brett stood beside her, his hand protectively on her shoulder, the devoted son. Crystal and Jerry worked the room with practiced smiles. "Malcolm," Lorraine said without warmth. "Carolina, you made it. Wouldn't miss it." "Mom," Malcolm replied evenly. Dinner was the usual production. 20 people crammed around the extended dining table, eating catered prime rib that Malcolm knew his mother couldn't actually afford. Brett told exaggerated stories about closing real estate deals. Crystal bragged about Jerry's latest opportunity. Aunt Vivian watched Malcolm with curious eyes. Malcolm ate quietly, answering questions politely, letting his family perform their usual dynamics. Carolina squeezed his hand under the table. Then came dessert, an elaborate Yule log cake. Lorraine stood to make her annual toast. "I'm so blessed," she began, her voice carrying that practiced warmth she showed for audiences. "To be surrounded by family. My wonderful son, Brett, who's made Rowe Properties more successful than ever." Brett beamed. "My beautiful daughter, Crystal, and her ambitious husband, Jerry, who's about to close the deal of his career." Polite applause. "My dear sister, Vivian, who's always been my rock." Her eyes swept the table and landed on Malcolm. The temperature seemed to drop. "And I'm grateful for all my children, except the disappointment in the corner." Nervous laughter rippled around the table. "Some children make you proud. Others make you wonder where you went wrong." Crystal snickered. Jerry smirked into his wine glass. Brett looked down, but he was smiling. The room went quiet. 20 pairs of eyes turned to Malcolm. He stood slowly, deliberately, reached into his jacket and pulled out the envelope. The red wax seal caught the candlelight. "Merry Christmas, Mom," he said calmly, placing the envelope directly on top of her precious cake, ruining the frosting. "This is from your disappointment." Then he took Carolina's hand and walked out. Behind them, Malcolm heard his mother's sharp intake of breath, the rustle of paper, and then silence. Heavy, terrible silence. They were in the car when his phone began buzzing. Texts, calls, voice messages. Carolina looked at him. What was in the envelope? Malcolm smiled. The truth. All of it. Lorraine Rowe's hands trembled as she opened the envelope, smudging chocolate frosting across the expensive paper. The dinner guests leaned in, their faces reflecting curiosity and hunger for drama. Inside were 40 pages of documents, professionally bound with tabs. The first page was a letter, typed on legal letterhead. Dear Mother, for 36 years, I've watched you treat me like a burden while elevating Brett and Crystal as your successes. Tonight, I'm giving you the Christmas gift you deserve. Truth. Tab 1. Bank records showing that Brett has embezzled $647,000 from Row Properties over 5 years. Notice the highlighted transactions: false vendor payments, phantom employees, and direct transfers to offshore accounts. I've included the IP logs from his computer, time-stamped and authenticated by a forensic accountant. Lorraine's face went white. Brett jumped up, knocking over his chair. That's a lie. He fabricated. Sit down, Brett, Aunt Vivian said sharply. Let her read. Tab 2. Loan documents showing that Crystal and Jerry defaulted on $200,000 in fraudulent business loans that you co-signed. The money was never used for business purposes. I've included photographs of Jerry's boat and the Maui timeshare purchase receipts. You're legally liable for every penny. Crystal's face flushed red. Malcolm always was jealous. Be quiet, Lorraine snapped, her voice cracking. Tab 3. Bank statements showing anonymous transfers totaling $1.2 million over 6 years. Every time your accounts were empty, money appeared. Every time the company was about to collapse, funds materialized. That money came from me. I've been keeping this family afloat while you called me your disappointment. The room erupted. Voices overlapped: shock, denial, accusations. Lorraine's hands shook violently as she flipped through page after page of irrefutable evidence. Tab 4. A detailed accounting of every dollar I've given this family. The $50,000 for Crystal's foreclosure. The $75,000 for Brett's investment opportunity. The $30,000 for your property taxes. The $18,000 for Crystal's credit cards. All documented. All real. Vivian leaned over Lorraine's shoulder, scanning the documents. Her face hardened as she looked at Brett and Crystal. Is this true? Aunt Vivian, he's manipulating, Brett started. Is this true? Vivian's voice could have cut glass. The final page was simple. As of today, all financial support ends. The anonymous transfers stop. Brett's embezzlement has been reported to the FBI and the Washington State Bar Association, since Row Properties handles real estate transactions, a regulated industry. Crystal and Jerry's loan fraud has been reported to the lenders and the police. You wanted a family of successes, Mother. You got one successful child. You just never bothered to notice him. Your disappointment, Malcolm Rowe. P.S. Merry Christmas. Lorraine collapsed back in her chair. The cake, forgotten, sat ruined beneath the envelope. Someone called 911. Paramedics arrived 20 minutes later to find her hyperventilating, clutching her chest. Not a heart attack, but a panic attack so severe she needed sedation. As the ambulance pulled away, Brett and Crystal stood in the driveway, their perfect facades crumbling. Aunt Vivian blocked them from following. Don't even think about going to the hospital, she said coldly. You two have done enough damage. By midnight, Malcolm's phone had 67 missed calls. He ignored them all. The day after Christmas, Malcolm's lawyer, Oliver Buchanan, called. The FBI wants to meet with you, Oliver said. They're very interested in your documentation on Brett. They've been investigating Row Properties for 6 months for unrelated issues. Your information gave them everything they needed for warrants. Malcolm had known about the FBI investigation. Henry's forensic work had uncovered that Brett wasn't just stealing from their mother. He'd been running a side scheme involving fraudulent property appraisals and kickbacks from contractors. The embezzlement was just the beginning. What about Crystal and Jerry? Malcolm asked. The loan fraud is more complicated, but the lenders are pursuing civil action. Jerry's consulting firm is being audited by the IRS. I suspect they'll find he hasn't paid taxes on that loan money. That afternoon, Malcolm received a call from an unknown number. He answered on speaker so Carolina could hear. Malcolm. His mother's voice was hoarse, defeated. We need to talk. No, we don't. Please. I'm sorry. I didn't know what Brett was doing. I didn't know you were. Didn't know? Or didn't care to look? Malcolm's voice was steel. For 36 years, You decided I was worthless. You told me that. Repeatedly. In front of everyone. Last night was just the final performance. I made mistakes. You made choices, Mom. You chose to believe Brett's lies because it was easier than admitting your golden child was a criminal. You chose to enable Crystal's spending because you liked playing the generous mother. You chose to treat me like garbage because I didn't need you, and that hurt your ego. Silence on the line. I gave you money because I'm not like you. Malcolm continued. I helped because family is supposed to help. But I'm done being invisible. I'm done being your disappointment. And I'm done pretending this relationship is salvageable. Malcolm. He hung up. Carolina wrapped her arms around him. How do you feel? Free, Malcolm said. And he meant it. The next few days brought consequences like dominoes falling. The FBI raided Rowe Properties, seizing computers and files. Brett was arrested at his home on federal embezzlement charges. The news ran stories about the real estate dynasty's dark secret. Crystal and Jerry's faces appeared in financial fraud reports. Aunt Vivian called Malcolm on New Year's Eve. I owe you an apology, she said. I should have said something years ago. I saw how she treated you. I stayed quiet because I didn't want to lose my sister. I chose her over what was right. You didn't participate in it, Malcolm said. That's more than most of them can say. Your mother's in bad shape. Financially, I mean. Without Brett managing the company. Well, she's realizing how much he destroyed. The house might have to be sold. Malcolm felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt. Just nothing. She made her choices, Vivian. Now she gets to live with them. 3 weeks into January, the full scope of Brett's crimes became public. He'd stolen nearly $900,000 total, more than Malcolm's initial documents had shown. He'd created shell companies, fake vendors, and a complex web of fraud that had operated for 7 years. Federal prosecutors were talking about 15 to 20 years in prison. Crystal and Jerry's situation was equally grim. The IRS found they'd hidden income from multiple sources. Jerry's consulting firm was actually a front for tax evasion. They faced both civil lawsuits from the loan companies and potential criminal charges. Malcolm's phone rang constantly with reporters wanting comments. He declined all interviews. This wasn't about publicity. It was about justice. Then came the unexpected call from Lorraine's estate attorney, Seth Hickman. Mr. Rowe, I'm calling because your mother's estate is in serious trouble. With the embezzlement, the lawsuits, and the property liens, she's looking at complete financial ruin. The house will be foreclosed within 60 days unless someone can cover $200,000 in immediate debts. Malcolm said nothing. I'm calling because you're still listed as next of kin for certain documents. And because you're the only one with the means to help. Is this a joke? Malcolm asked coldly. No, sir. I'm simply informing you of the situation. Your mother wanted me to ask if you would consider. No, Mr. Rowe. My mother spent decades telling me I was worthless. She called me her disappointment in front of 20 people at Christmas. She enabled my brother's theft and my sister's fraud. She took my money for years without even knowing it was me, because she never cared enough to ask questions. Now she's facing consequences for her choices, and she wants me to save her. She's your mother. Biologically, Malcolm said. That's all. Tell her the disappointment says no. He hung up and found Carolina in their home gym, working through her kickboxing routine. That was Mom's lawyer, he said. She's about to lose everything. Want me to bail her out? Carolina stopped mid-punch. What did you say? I said no. He sat on the weight bench. Am I a bad person? She knelt in front of him, taking his hands. You're the person who paid their mortgage for 6 years while they mocked you. You're the person who covered their debts, saved their business, and kept their secrets. You didn't create this situation. They did. You don't owe them anything. I keep waiting to feel guilty, Malcolm admitted. But I don't. Good, Carolina said fiercely. You earned your peace. February brought sunshine and clarity. Brett's trial date was set for June. He tried to claim Malcolm had framed him, but the evidence was overwhelming, much of it from Brett's own computer, seized by the FBI. His lawyer was negotiating a plea deal to avoid the maximum sentence. Crystal and Jerry declared bankruptcy. They lost their house, their cars, and their country club memberships. Jerry faced tax evasion charges that could mean prison time. Crystal moved in with their mother, except there was no mother's house anymore. Lorraine's estate sold for pennies on the dollar in a foreclosure auction. Malcolm didn't bid. He let it go to a young family with 3 kids who were thrilled with the beautiful property. Lorraine moved into a small apartment, relying on Social Security and what little remained of her savings after the legal bills and settlements. She tried calling Malcolm twice more. He never answered. Aunt Vivian, however, became a regular presence. She'd severed ties with Lorraine after learning the full extent of the favoritism and abuse. "I enabled her by staying silent," Vivian told Malcolm over lunch. "I'm not doing that anymore. I want to be in your life, if you'll let me." Malcolm did. Vivian was genuine, warm, and genuinely interested in his work and his marriage. She became the family member he'd never had. At Vortex Solutions, business was booming. The scandal hadn't touched Malcolm. If anything, it had generated sympathy. Self-made entrepreneur exposes family fraud, made for good press. 3 major clients signed contracts in February alone. Henry Guerrero joined them for dinner in mid-February. "You know what's funny?" he said. "Your family spent years telling you that you were nothing. Now you're the most successful person any of them know, and they have to live with that." "It's not about success," Malcolm said. "It's about respect. They never gave me that. And now you'll never give them another chance," Henry observed. "That's cold, man." "It's self-preservation," Carolina corrected. "There's a difference between being cold and having boundaries." Malcolm nodded. "I spent 36 years hoping they'd see me. Now I don't care if they do or not. That's not cold. That's free." In late March, Malcolm received a certified letter. Inside was a handwritten note on his mother's stationery. Expensive paper she somehow still had. "Malcolm, I'm writing because I need you to understand something. Everything I did because I loved Brett and Crystal. They needed me. You never did. You were always so self-sufficient, so cold, so distant. I gave my love where it was needed. What you did at Christmas destroyed this family. Brett might go to prison. Crystal has nothing. I've lost my home. You did this. Your cruelty, your revenge, this is on you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that when I look in the mirror, I see a mother who loved her children. When you look in yours, you'll see the man who destroyed his family over hurt feelings. I hope that brings you comfort. Mother." Malcolm read it twice, then showed it to Carolina and Henry. "She's trying to guilt you," Carolina said immediately. "Classic narcissist move. She's rewriting history, so she's the victim." "She said Brett might go to prison," Henry pointed out. "Like Malcolm put the money in offshore accounts. Like Malcolm forged those documents." Malcolm folded the letter carefully. Then he went to his office, pulled out his own stationery, and wrote a response. He had it delivered by the same courier service, certified mail. "Mother, thank you for clarifying your position. You're right about one thing. I destroyed what you call this family. But what you called a family was actually a hierarchy where you were queen, Brett, and Crystal were royalty, and I was the servant who should be grateful for scraps. You say you gave your love where it was needed. Here's what I needed: to hear I'm proud of you when I got an MIT, to have you attend my graduation, to hear congratulations when I started my business, to be introduced without shame, to be treated like I mattered. Instead, you call me a disappointment, in front of everyone, at Christmas, because even after everything I'd done, everything I'd accomplished, everything I'd given, I was still just your failure in your eyes. You didn't destroy this family through love. You destroyed it through favoritism, neglect, and enabling criminals. Brett stole nearly $1 million. Crystal committed fraud. They did that, not me. I just stopped hiding it. When you look in the mirror, you see a mother who loved her children. When I look in mine, I see a man who finally loved himself enough to walk away. That does bring me comfort. Malcolm, he never received a response. June arrived with Brett's trial. He pleaded guilty to multiple counts of embezzlement and fraud, accepting a 12-year sentence with possibility of parole in 8. The judge noted his complete lack of remorse as a factor in the sentencing. Jerry's tax trial went differently. He tried to fight, claiming ignorance, but the evidence was damning. He received 6 years. Crystal, who'd cooperated with investigators, got probation and community service, but her reputation was destroyed. Malcolm didn't attend any of the proceedings. He sent Oliver Buchanan to observe and report back, but he didn't waste his energy on being there in person. Instead, he focused on building. In July, Vortex Solutions announced a major expansion into sustainable housing development. Malcolm had partnered with a nonprofit to create affordable, energy-efficient homes for low-income families. The first development would be in South Seattle, featuring 50 units. "This is what I want my legacy to be," he told Carolina at the groundbreaking ceremony. "Not revenge, not family drama. This, creating something that matters." She kissed him. "You already created that. You've been doing it for years." Aunt Vivian attended the ceremony and pulled Malcolm aside afterward. "Your mother saw the news coverage," she said carefully. "She called me crying. Said she didn't realize how successful you'd become." "That's the problem," Malcolm said. "She never bothered to look. It took public humiliation for her to even check. She asked if I thought you'd ever forgive her." Malcolm watched the construction crew working on the foundation of the future homes. Young families who would have safe, affordable places to live because of his work. "Tell her I hope she finds peace," he said finally. "But I don't need to be part of her finding it. I built my own peace." Vivian nodded. "That's fair." The first family moved into the Vortex housing development on a crisp October morning. Malcolm and Carolina were there to hand over the keys personally. The young couple had a 2-year-old daughter who immediately ran to explore her new bedroom. "Thank you," the mother said, tears streaming down her face. "You have no idea what this means." Malcolm smiled. "Actually, I do. I know what it's like to build something from nothing, to prove yourself when nobody believes in you." That evening, he and Carolina sat on their back deck, watching the sunset over Puget Sound. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "The Christmas letter? Burning that bridge?" Malcolm considered the question. In his mind, he saw the disappointment in his mother's eyes, but this time he saw it differently. Her disappointment wasn't about him. It had never been about him. It was about her own failures reflected back at her, and she projected those feelings onto him for decades. "No," he said, "I don't regret it. I regret that it took me 36 years to realize I deserved better. But the letter? The truth? That was the greatest gift I ever gave myself." His phone buzzed with an email from Henry. "Vortex Q3 profits up 47%. We're crushing it, man." Another message from Oliver. Brett's appeals were denied. He starts serving his full sentence next month. Malcolm deleted both messages without responding. Those things didn't matter anymore. What mattered was Carolina's hand in his. The sunset painting the sky in gold and purple. The knowledge that somewhere in South Seattle, 50 families were safe and warm in homes he'd built. The freedom of knowing he never had to prove himself to people who'd never been willing to see him. "I'm not their disappointment," he said aloud. "I never was." "No," Carolina agreed, squeezing his hand. "You were always the success story. They were just too blind to read it." Malcolm Rowe, entrepreneur, husband, builder of futures, smiled at the setting sun. He'd spent 36 years being invisible to people who didn't matter. Now he was visible to everyone who did. And that was the best revenge of all. Living well, loving deeply, and never looking back. The disappointment in the corner had walked out into the light. And he'd built an empire while they all watched from the shadows of their own making. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.